Today I want to test the different exposure monitoring tools like Zebras, false color, EL zone, Luma waveforms, RGB waveforms, RGB Parade, and all that jazz. I have the monitor right here. I have a second camera right there. I have my color checker right here, and we're going to be taking a look at every one of them. Let's go. Believe it or not, IRE actually stands for Institute of Radio Engineers, which doesn't really mean anything with that because it's just a unit that measures the video signal levels. What that is it takes your image, and we have this graph, and this graph represents your image. Put the image onto the graph, and then it basically represents the different brightness levels of the image. The 100 IRE would be absolute white point that we have no information, and 0 IRE would be the absolute black point that we also don't have information. So our whole image is between this like 0 and 100 level. It just works there, and it's just to know how bright of an image is with this measure of unit of measurement. And on that note, one more thing to understand is 18% middle gray. So this right here, this is the 18% middle gray point. And it is different it has a different IRE value for every different log gamma. For example, for Sony S-Log3, this should be 41 IRE. For example, for ARRI log C3, I believe this is 39% IRE. And there is a question that I've asked and I've heard people ask is why is this middle gray? Even though it is middle gray, it's at 18%, and why is it not at 50 IRE? So it's basically a 43% gray, so not exactly gray, middle gray, I guess, on a 0 to 1 scale, and we divide that we multiply. Is it multiply or divide? And we basically divide that 0.43 to the viewing gamma of Rec 709, which is 2.4, and then we get the 0.18, which is why that this is 18% middle gray. There's also a great episode of Team Deacon's podcast with Steve Yedlin, been out for like a month or something, I guess. It's not about like exposure monitoring levels, but there are some talk about the middle gray and HDR and kind of viewing stuff. It's a great episode. You can watch that. And why is the 18% middle gray not 50% IRE? That I do not know, and I would like to know, but I am guessing that it's a complicated answer and would need its own video. So we're just gonna stick with different exposure monitoring tools right now. And I guess with that we can start. Zebras are called zebras because they have these stripes, the white stripes that you're seeing, the red stripes. To be honest with you, I don't know what this is in this monitor, but in general, zebras show you a specific IRE value and a plus minus range. Like usually it's like plus minus 5, and then like you can say, okay, it's gonna be 41% IRE, plus minus 5 in the range. So you can see it here. Right now it is showing that I am actually good, like perfectly exposed, because this is hitting 41 IRE. We can go to the range and just make it a little less. We can do plus minus 0, and then I would see that near my face would be here, and this would be kind of like perfect exposure right now. Different cameras, different monitors have different settings for this. Usually in most monitors and most cameras you have a plus minus 5 range. The thing that I love about this, it shows you a specific IRE value, which I think is a great thing. The thing that I don't love about this is it shows you just that specific IRE value, or like let's say a plus minus 5, but it doesn't really show you more information, like not the whole image, not the clipping point. You can always say, okay, you know what, let's just do like 95% IRE and then plus minus 5, and then it would tell you where you're clipping. But I don't know, like I use zebras actually when I'm taking a photo because I actually want to know when I'm clipping, but other than that I rarely use zebras. And like even with the photos, it doesn't really work the same way as in video because it's a raw thing, you can bring it down, like blah blah, but in general this is what zebras do. let's take a look at Luma waveforms and RGB parades together in this example. You can see we have two different graphs. There are three different graphs, vector scopes. I'm gonna skip that for now because we're looking at exposure. So we're gonna be sticking around to these two, which I'm going to start with the Luma waveforms. Luma waveforms is basically what I've explained to you with IRE. It just, this is our image. You can see when I move, the graph also moves because it just maps our entire image into these brightness levels, into these IRE values, and then it shows you what the image is seeing. 100 is the white point and 0 is the black point. So if I'm not clipping, I'm usually fine. Of course, like light matters and stuff, I'm not talking about that, but you know, you would see the clipping here. I could show you how that would look. We can just change my ISO and you are seeing how the waveforms are clipping, how my image is actually clipping right there, and it can show you. You can also see that it is clipping right there. So I'm just going to go back to my normal exposure. RGB waveform and RGB parade does actually the same thing. So Luma waveform, the difference between a Luma waveform and RGB waveform is Luma just takes the whole luminance, whole brightness of the entire image, and RGB waveforms take the red, green, and blue levels. So there are two types of RGB parades or RGB waveforms. They're called RGB waveforms and RGB parades. These are parades. Waveforms could be together in one graph. Basically what you're seeing is the same thing as Luma, but in different colors. So you can see if one color is clipping, you know, if you're shooting something in a red environment, the lights are red, so red might be clipping, but the other colors maybe are not clipping and stuff like that. So it is easier to monitor stuff like that with RGB waveforms and RGB parades. Now let's talk about false color, which is a lot of people's favorite way to monitor exposure, which I get it because it's also my favorite way too, probably, because it lets you monitor the entire image. So the difference between this and the zebras were just for a specific IRE value or a range of IRE values. But this one just lets you monitor the entire image. So I can see where I'm clipping, I can see where I'm crushing my blacks, I can see where my skin tones are right, my absolute exposure is perfectly hit. I can see everything like that. As you can see, there are a couple of different colors. We have red here for clipping, yellow for just under clipping. We have our purple, which is good for skin tones, and then we have our green, or we can just go and put my exposure high, and then we can see what happens to the image, which I am clipping. At this point, I would also show you this one. So this is my phone, and this is the Sony's own monitor control app, and the false color in there. And we can see that this false color is also the same as this one. It just is a bit more accurate, which, you know, is a whole nother issue that we can get into at a point. But I want to show you the clipping point. You can go take a look at, for example, we can just push my ISO up, and then you can see that this is clipping right now, and the other stuff is still there around the same thing. But it just in general lets you monitor the entire image without having to deal with, oh yeah, I'm just seeing the 41% IRE and not anything more and stuff like that. Great job, haha. So before I explain what EL Zone is, a couple of notes to make about EL Zone. Ed Lackman, I believe, is the creator of EL Zone, and I think that's why it's called EL Zone. Now, one thing to be careful about this. EL Zone is officially supported just with small HD monitors right now. I have a Portkeys BM7 monitor, and the Portkeys BM5 does that too. They allow you to use log-based false color, which is a fancy way of saying it's a fake EL zone. It works in the exact same way. The accuracy is something that we could, you know, take a look at, which I do plan to make a video and do my own tests on that. For right now, for this video's purposes, let's say it is completely accurate and it is EL zone, even though the name is log-based false color. Yeah, let's take a look at that. It's basically a spot metering system with false color kind of built in. You can think of it like that, because it does the same thing as false color, but it's not about IREs anymore, and it's about exposure stops. So when you give your monitor the log gamma that you're working with, it maps that gamma and those exposure stops, and it gives you a map of colors like you're seeing right now, from -6 to +6, and it gives you the 18% middle gray as your middle tone. And you can see every different color, and every different color means an exposure stop. So it's a lot easier to, you know, get your contrast ratios right. And if I were to, for example, push my ISO up, I would see that I am clipping right over here, right over there, and I am not clipping on my face, but it is actually 4 stop overexposed than the 18% middle gray. This is one of the advantages of this. The other advantage is this thing, it basically works like a light meter. So I can say, okay, 18% middle gray, 18% middle gray is right there, and it is actually a perfectly exposed image. I can see the bright side of my face has this like orange color, which is the +2, and then I can see the darker side of my face has the I would say it is about like something like that, probably above the 18% gray, so half a stop. So I have a 1.5 stop of difference, which is, to be honest with you, not enough contrast ratio, but I'm working with natural light, so natural light is good, and I don't have to want to rig up lights right now. But it is in general how this thing works. It allows you to monitor your contrast levels and your exposure at the same time, which I think is a great idea, and I can wait to use it more and for it to be implemented more in many more monitors, hopefully. This is what EL Zone does. All right, so these are basically all the ways that I can think of to to monitor your exposure. I mean, there's light meters and stuff which you don't do quite monitoring. This is monitoring. Again, another topic for another day. We can talk about that too, which I do want to talk about that. But yeah, so these are basically the different exposure methods that you can use, that I use. I'm usually using, right now, since I have the Portkeys monitor, I'm using the EL Zone, but I usually use false color on other monitors, or with the Sony's own monitor control app, or my other monitor has also false color. Like every monitor has false color nowadays. Do I have anything more to say? Yes. All right, there's going to be more videos. I'm going to talk about contrast ratios, light metering, monitor review with this monitor. Yeah, cool stuff. Bye.